Let me tell you about a test. A teacher hangs a wooden bird high in a tree, gathers his students underneath it, and hands the first one a bow. Then he asks a question nobody expects. Not, can you hit it? He asks, what do you see? The first student answers honestly. I see the tree, the branches, the leaves, the bird. I see you, teacher. I see my brothers standing around me. The teacher takes the bow away from him, and from the next, and from the next. Then he comes to a boy named Arjuna, who says 4 words. I see the eye. The teacher asks, the tree? Your brothers? The bird? And Arjuna says, no, only the eye. That boy became the greatest archer of his age, and roughly 100,000 verses later, he is sitting in a chariot on a battlefield, having a complete breakdown, unable to move. Which tells you something important, and it's where we start. Focus is not a personality trait you either have or don't have. It's a state you enter and lose. Even he lost it. The next 20 minutes are about how you get it back, every time it goes. 5 stories, 2 traditions. Let's go. Go back to that tree for a second, because the story is more precise than it first appears. The other students weren't wrong. The tree really was there. The leaves were there. Their brothers were there. Every single thing they reported was true. They failed the test by being accurate. That is exactly what happens to you on a Tuesday. Everything on your list is real. The email genuinely needs answering. Your mother genuinely did call. The invoice is genuinely overdue. That article is genuinely interesting and relevant to your work. You are not distracted by lies. You are distracted by true things, which is why you can't beat it by asking, is this important? Nearly everything will pass that test. The only question that works is the one the teacher asked. What am I aiming at? Singular. The Gita's word for this is ekagra, one-pointed. And Krishna's instruction for a scattered mind is almost mechanical. Little by little, with determination, let the mind be brought to rest, holding it in the self and thinking of nothing else. Not prioritize, not balance. For this hour, nothing else. And the Buddhist tradition adds the piece that saves you from feeling like a failure about it. Focus, in the suttas, has a name, samadhi. And it is a factor to be developed, not a gift you either received or didn't. It sits on the eightfold path next to right effort, and effort is trained. The Dhammapada's image for how it's trained? Like a fletcher straightening an arrow, the wise straighten the trembling, unsteady mind. A fletcher, heat, pressure, hands, one shaft at a time. Arrows don't grow straight. They're made straight. So if focus feels difficult for you, that is not a diagnosis. That's the raw material. Everyone starts with a crooked shaft. Lesson 1. You are not distracted by unimportant things. You're distracted by many important things. Pick the eye. Second story. The most famous night in Buddhist tradition, and it is not a peaceful one. Siddhartha sits down under a tree and resolves not to get up until he has understood. And what arrives is not enlightenment. What arrives is Mara. Mara comes with an army, and the tradition is very specific about the order of the assault. First, force. Wind, rain, rocks, weapons, a storm, everything thrown at him. And the striking detail in the telling, as the weapons come near the seated man, they turn into flowers and fall at his feet. Then, when force fails, pleasure. Mara sends his daughters, craving, aversion, and delight. Everything he might still want, offered right there. And then, the last weapon. When the storm has failed and the seduction has failed, Mara asks him a single question. Who do you think you are? What gives you the right to sit there? Who will vouch for you? Doubt. That's the final weapon. Not obstacles, not temptation. The question of whether you were ever qualified to be doing this at all. And Siddhartha does not argue. He doesn't produce credentials. He reaches down and touches the ground. The earth is my witness. That gesture is carved into more statues than any in Asia. And here is what it actually means, translated out of mythology. He pointed at the work he had already done. Not at his talent, not at a title. At 6 years of practice, thousands of hours of sitting, everything he had already put in. This is here. It happened. It is in the ground under me. And no question you ask can remove it.
Now, watch this map onto your own derailments in exactly that order. Force is the obvious one. The rejection, the lost client, the failed launch, the diagnosis. You brace for these, and you survive most of them. Pleasure takes more of you than force ever does. Not the dramatic collapse, the soft one, the comfort, the scroll, the easier project. Nobody's dream died in a crisis. They died in a series of pleasant evenings. But doubt is what ends things. Who am I to be doing this? Everyone else clearly knows something I don't. This isn't for people like me. Krishna maps the same collapse as a sequence. From dwelling comes attachment. From attachment, desire. From desire, agitation. From agitation, confusion. From confusion, loss of memory. And when memory goes, judgment is ruined, and the person is lost. Note the step before the end, loss of memory, smriti bhramsha. You don't get derailed because you forgot your goal. You get derailed because you forgot what you've already survived. That is the actual mechanism. And it's why Buddha's answer to doubt was not an argument. It was a reminder. He touched the ground. Lesson 2. When doubt comes, don't debate it. Touch the ground. Look at your evidence. Third story, and it's about someone with no evidence at all. There was a monk called Kulapanthaka, and by every account, he was the slowest student in the community. His own brother, a senior monk, gave him a single verse to memorize. One verse. And Kulapanthaka worked on it for 4 months and could not hold it in his head. He'd get the first line, lose the second. Get the second, lose the first. His brother eventually told him what everyone was already thinking. You're not suited to this. Go home. And the story says he stood outside the monastery gate and wept. Because he agreed. He had 4 months of hard evidence that he could not do this. The Buddha found him there, and he did not give him a pep talk. He did not tell him he was secretly gifted. He handed him a clean white cloth and told him to sit in the sun and rub it and repeat one word, removing the dirt, removing the dirt. So he sat there, rubbing a piece of cloth, This is not a dignified assignment. And as he rubbed it, the cloth, from his own hands, his own sweat, became dirty. And he looked at it. And in that moment, this man who could not memorize a single line understood impermanence directly, in his hands, not as a verse to recite, but as a fact he was holding. The tradition says he broke through completely that afternoon. He later became renowned in the community, and the point is not that he was secretly brilliant. The point is that 4 months of failing to memorize a verse was not 4 months of nothing. It was 4 months of a mind being worn smooth, one useless-looking repetition at a time. The cloth was not the cause. The cloth was the last of 10,000 strokes.
And this is where the Gita makes its single most important promise to anyone in the middle of a setback. On this path, no effort is ever lost. Nothing done is ever undone. Even a little of this practice protects you from great fear. Sit with that for a second, because it is a stronger claim than any modern motivational language dares to make. No effort is lost. Not most, not the successful ones. The years that went nowhere, the business that closed, the degree you didn't use, the relationship that ended, the practice you kept up for 8 months and dropped. None of it was deleted. It's in the ground. It's what you touch when Mara asks who you think you are. And a few chapters later, Krishna makes the same promise again, more plainly. No one who does good work ever comes to a bad end. He says it, notice, immediately after Arjuna asks what happens to the person who tries and fails, who starts the path with real intention and doesn't make it. That's the actual question in the text. What about the one who falls short? And the answer is, the falling short is not the end of the accounting. Lesson 3. Your failed attempts are not the opposite of progress. They are the unglamorous body of it. Fourth story, my favorite in either tradition, and it's a Jātaka tale, one of the stories of the Buddha's earlier lives. A ship goes down in the middle of the ocean, hundreds of miles from land. Everyone aboard drowns except one man, a prince called Mahajanaka, and he starts to swim. He swims for 7 days. No land in any direction. No sail on the horizon. No reasonable expectation of survival. And he is a strong enough swimmer to understand exactly how bad his odds are. And a goddess, watching from above, is puzzled enough to come down and ask him the obvious question. Why are you still swimming? There is no shore. You cannot see one, and there isn't one within reach. What is the point of this? And his answer is the reason I'm telling you this story. Striving is the duty of a human being. I have looked at the situation, and I am still swimming. Because the one who makes the effort, even if he does not reach the shore, has nothing to reproach himself for. And if I stop, I will drown for certain, and I will have earned it. That's it. He does not claim he'll make it. He does not visualize the beach. He does not tell himself the universe has a plan. He simply refuses to make the drowning his own decision. Now, that is a Buddhist story, and it is word for word the central teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. You have a claim on the action, never on the fruit. The swimming is his. The shore was never his. And because he understood which was which, he could keep going on day 6 with no evidence at all. Because his fuel was never evidence. That's the whole thing.
Motivation that runs on results will fail you exactly when you need it most later. Because setbacks are, by definition, the absence of results. If results are the fuel, the tank is empty precisely when the swim gets long. But effort that has been released from results can continue indefinitely. Not because you're superhuman, because you've stopped requiring the horizon to give you permission. And this is why the Gita's definition of yoga is not acceptance. It's yoga is skill in action. Skill. He wasn't floating. He was swimming well for 7 days. Detachment from the outcome does not lower the standard of the work. It removes the panic from it. And panicking swimmers drown first. The Buddha said something almost brutally direct about this same posture, describing his own struggle against Mara. Better for me to die in this battle than to live on, defeated. Lesson 4, swim because swimming is what you do, not because you can see the shore.
5th story. Tibet, about 1,000 years ago. A man named Milarepa has done something terrible in his youth. Real harm, real deaths. And he comes to a teacher, Marpa, desperate to be taught. And Marpa says, "Build me a tower." So Milarepa builds a tower, carries the stones himself up a hill for months, finishes it, comes back. And Marpa looks at it and says, "Wrong place. Tear it down. Put every stone back where you found it." So he does, and builds another one, which Marpa also rejects. And another. Sores open on his back from carrying the stones. The accounts describe them in detail. Tower after tower, built and demolished. And every time, the reasons are arbitrary, or contradictory, or no reason is given at all. Now, Milarepa becomes one of the most revered figures in the entire Tibetan tradition. And when you read what he later taught, the towers are not a footnote. They were the training. Not the buildings, the building. Marpa wasn't collecting architecture. He was burning something out of a man who arrived carrying an enormous weight of harm. And the tool he used was work that produced nothing.
I know what the modern objection is. That's just abuse with a happy ending. And it's worth saying plainly, there are teachers who demolish your towers for no reason at all, and no wisdom comes out of it. Discernment about who you take instruction from is part of the practice, not a betrayal of it. But most of us are not in Milarepa's situation. Most of us are in a much more ordinary version. You worked for 8 months on something, and the funding got pulled. The reorg deleted your project. The client changed direction. The manuscript was rejected by everyone. The relationship you built your decade around ended. Nobody was teaching you anything. It just got torn down. And here's the only thing worth saying to that, and it's the same thing we've already established twice. The tower is gone. The man who can build towers is still standing there. That's not a consolation prize. That is what actually transferred. Nobody can demolish it because it isn't in the stones, it's in the hands. Quote, "The self is the self's own friend and the self's own enemy." Nobody's coming to rebuild it for you, and nobody has to. You've already done it several times. Lesson 5, they can take the tower. They cannot take the builder. So, practically, tomorrow morning, 6 things, and each one comes from a story you just heard. 1. Name the I before you start. Dronus test. 1 sentence, written down before you open anything. Today, this. If you can't name it in a sentence, you don't have a target. You have a list. 2. When doubt comes, touch the ground. Mara. Don't argue with it. You'll lose. It's better at arguing than you are. Instead, look at evidence. Things you finished, things you survived. Keep an actual list of them somewhere. Doubt is an argument. Evidence is not. 3. Count the strokes, not the cloth. Kulapanthaka. Track what you put in, not what came out. Outputs are lumpy and arrive on their own schedule. Inputs are daily, and they're yours. 4. Swim on days with no horizon. Decide in advance what your minimum daily effort is, so that on the bad days, there's no negotiation. You will not win that negotiation while you're drowning. 5. Separate the tower from the builder. Milarepa. After any loss, write 2 columns. What was destroyed and what I now know how to do. The second column has never once been empty. 6. Little by little. Pick one of the 5 above. The urge to start all 5 tomorrow is the same energy that abandoned the last 3 systems you tried.
Let's go back to where we started. Arjuna, the boy who saw only the eye, is now a grown man in a chariot, and he has fallen apart. He has dropped his bow. He is sitting down in the middle of a battlefield saying, "I can't." The greatest archer of his age, total collapse, in front of everyone. And 18 chapters later, he is standing on the same field, facing the same impossible task, with nothing external improved in any way, and he says, "My confusion is gone. I have my memory back." Remember the mechanism from earlier? The step right before everything is lost is loss of memory. So the recovery is exactly that step, reversed. He didn't gain anything new. He remembered what he already had. That's what I want to leave you with, because it changes what you're looking for when you're derailed. You are not waiting to become someone else. You're not missing a technique or a trait or a morning routine you haven't discovered yet. You've just forgotten what's already in the ground under you. The 4 months of failing. The tower they tore down. The 7 days you swam with no shore in sight and no reason to believe. Every bit of it is still there. Nothing on this path is ever lost. So when it comes, and it will come this week, in some form, don't argue with the doubt. Touch the ground. Find the eye of the bird, and pick the bow back up.
If you resonated with the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for listening.